I'm Mason's longest-standing girlfriend. He's quite a prominent figure in the New York social circle. I've been able to stay by his side for so long, probably because I'm both innocent and well-behaved, and I especially listen to him. Everyone thinks I'm just lucky to be with him, but only I know the truth. Mason is completely devoted to me. Actually, it's all part of my careful planning, even when he later cheated on me and broke up with me. That was also designed by me. I fell for his uncle Nathan. 3 years after being with Mason, he took me home to meet his family. I blinked my big eyes with false eyelashes and looked at Mason a bit nervously. Mason, will your family not like me? What if they hate me? I gently placed my hand on his chest. It felt particularly tender and pure. I know Mason really likes me this way. Sure enough, his breathing became much more rapid. Don't worry, baby. Even if they don't like you, I will always like you if it weren't for the driver in the car. Mason would have definitely started getting handsy with me by now. I arrived at the Thompson family mansion. The grandeur of the estate left me in awe. I know the Thompson family is very wealthy. During the 3 years with Mason, he often spent a lot of money on me, but seeing this scene, I was still very surprised. Mason wrapped his arm around me as we entered the room, but when he saw a tall person standing in the living room, his expression immediately darkened. He let out a cold snort. His tone was laced with disdain. He actually came back. What a buzzkill. I was taken aback. I followed his gaze. A very charismatic man stood in front of the sofa, wearing a long trench coat, with a pair of gold-rimmed glasses perched on his high nose. He looks very elegant and polite. It seems he noticed me looking at him, so he turned his head and smiled faintly at me. He called out, "Mason, you're back." Mason reluctantly put his arm around me and walked over. He shouted, "Uncle Nathan." I was taken aback for a moment. I stared at the man in front of me. He looked to be around 30 years old. It turned out to be Mason's uncle. The man's gaze lightly swept over me and quickly moved away. But in that moment, my heart seemed to skip a beat. "You're Mason's girlfriend. I'm Nathan. I'm his uncle. You can sit here for a moment. I have something to discuss with Mason." He smiled at me and nodded. Then he took Mason away. I watched their departing figures. I hesitated for a moment, but I decided to follow them. As someone who is good at reading people, at such an important moment, I need to be aware of his family's thoughts at all times, so I can adjust my next plans. They arrived at the back garden of the estate. I quietly followed them to a place where I could barely hear their conversation. I only heard Mason say coldly, "What are you back for? Tonight is family dinner. You're just the illegitimate child of the Thompson family. What qualification do you have to come back?" Nathan's voice remained calm. "You seem to be unclear. I am the heir of the Thompson family." Mason clenched his fists tightly. His tone was firm. "So what? I don't believe I can't achieve results on my own, even less than you. Nathan, just wait and see. My future achievements will never be inferior to yours." After saying that, Mason turned and left. I don't know if it's my illusion. I seem to feel Nathan's gaze lightly sweep over to my side. I was taken aback. Quickly go back to the living room, but the conversation just now has left me in turmoil. Mason is actually not the heir. I approached him because he is the eldest grandson of the Thompson family. If he has no inheritance rights, then he is of no use to me. I remember what Nathan looks like. His temperament and appearance fit my preferences perfectly. It seems I need to change my strategy. Before the Thompson family dinner starts in the evening, I put on a short skirt. Nathan is sitting on the sofa, looking down at his phone. I sit across from him when he finally looks up at me. I slowly spread my legs apart because I am not wearing any underwear. I gently lifted my eyelids. I quickly glanced at Nathan's face. His eyes behind the glasses moved slightly. It seems there is some hidden emotion, but he quickly calmed down, as if nothing had happened. Not bad. The fish is hooked. I secretly feel pleased. As long as he notices, my plan would be half successful. After all, men, how many can resist such obvious temptation? At that moment, Mason leaned over. He put his arm around my shoulder and pulled me into his embrace. "Baby, Grandpa Thompson will be here soon. You need to perform well, make a good impression on him." I casually nodded, but inwardly I scoffed. My target isn't your serious Grandpa Thompson. It's your suave Uncle Nathan. Nathan suddenly spoke up. "Mason, your girlfriend just now." I was momentarily stunned. My heart almost stopped, worried that Nathan would mention what just happened. Have I really been in the dating scene for so many years? And today I'm going to mess it up here. I even started to think, if Mason found out, how would I get out of this? how to minimize the losses. I didn't expect Nathan to suddenly change his tone. He said it casually. He seems a bit nervous. My previously tense mood relaxed all of a sudden. It turns out he was just teasing me. Not only was I not angry, but it actually got me more excited. His reaction like this indicates that he has feelings for me. If he were cold and indifferent, not showing any reaction at all, I really wouldn't know what to do. But now it's good. He came right to me. How could I not accept it? Mason is really quite simple. He really thinks I'm nervous. He held me and comforted me for quite a while. His hands were also restless, touching my waist here and there. He kept mumbling, "Baby, don't worry, I'm here for you. If Grandpa Thompson dares to say anything to you, I would be the first to disagree." I feel a bit helpless inside, but I still showed a grateful expression on my face. "Mason, you're really nice." I glanced at Nathan out of the corner of my eye. He was wearing gold-rimmed glasses. His gaze was somewhat elusive. The corners of his mouth slightly curled up, with a hint of mockery. This man successfully ignited my desire to conquer. I secretly made up my mind. I must win him over. When the time comes, the Thompson family will be at my mercy. Just thinking about it is exciting. Not long after, Mason's Grandpa Thompson, the true power holder of the Thompson family, arrived at the estate by car. As the car door opened, a tall, elderly man got out of the car. He was wearing a tang suit. His hair was neatly combed. Although his face had many wrinkles, it was still evident that he was handsome in his youth. However, his aura was too strong, making it hard for people to look him in the eye. You can tell he must have been very handsome when he was young. Unfortunately, he's older now. If he were younger, I would definitely choose him. Instead of Mason or Nathan, I thought to myself, the genes of the Thompson family are truly good. No matter the age, they all fit my aesthetic very well. Mason immediately walked over, enthusiastically supporting the elder. "Grandpa Thompson, you've arrived." The elder nodded, gave me a once-over. His tone carried a hint of doubt. "This is the girlfriend you mentioned." Mason quickly brought me in front of the elder. He said, "Grandpa Thompson, this is Sophia. You can just call her Sophia." I immediately put on a well-behaved smile, sweetly called out, "Hi, Grandpa Thompson." The elder responded lightly. There was no emotion visible. I felt a bit nervous inside. This old man is tougher to deal with than Mason, but I still wore a proper smile on my face. I didn't show any signs of abnormality at all. Nathan walked over at that moment. He respectfully called out, "Father." The old man looked at him. His tone became a bit gentler. Nathan had returned. At this time, I felt Mason's fingers gripping my arm starting to tighten. His grip gradually intensified. It was almost crushing my bones. He stared intently at Nathan's back. The jealousy in his eyes surged violently. Perhaps it was because Grandpa Thompson's attitude towards Nathan was so different from his own. It made him feel very uncomfortable inside. Grandpa Thompson was warm and caring towards Nathan, but he was cold and distant towards him. This contrast inevitably felt unfair. Grandpa Thompson chatted with Nathan for a few moments. Then he turned to Mason. He asked coldly, "Where's your dad?" Mason had just looked furious. But at this moment, he immediately put on a docile appearance. The voice became softer. "Dad is busy with business out of town. He really can't make it back." Grandpa Thompson snorted. His tone was laced with disdain. What business can he do? As long as he doesn't lose money, it's a blessing. Mason's expression suddenly dimmed. I could even sense his suppressed anger. His body was slightly trembling. As for Mason's father, I've heard some things in the circle. He's quite famous in the entertainment industry. This is not because he has any particularly outstanding talent, but because he is always surrounded by different female celebrities. Almost every time, it's someone new. It's said that he has dated many people in the entertainment industry. From this perspective, Grandpa Thompson's words are indeed correct. The meal isn't ready yet. Grandpa Thompson gave a glance to the two of them, uncle and nephew. "Come to the study." Watching the three of them walk into the hallway, I hesitated for a moment, but I secretly followed them. I'm not here to eavesdrop on family secrets this time. I have only one goal, Nathan. I'm standing at the door of the study. The heavy wooden door blocks out the sounds from inside completely. I can hardly hear anything. After a while, the door of the study opened from the inside. Nathan appeared at the doorway. I seized the opportunity, suddenly rushed forward, grabbed his shirt tightly, pressed him hard against the cold wall. Nathan didn't seem surprised. His deep eyes seemed to see right through everything. He stared straight at me. "Nathan." I raised my head. I tried to make my voice sound gentle yet a bit teasing. I asked softly, in such a hurry to leave. Where are you planning to go? Nathan's Adam's apple moved. His gaze lingered on my face. His expression was somewhat complicated. Sophia, what are you doing? What are you doing? I smiled faintly. My fingers slid up along the buttons of his shirt one by one. What do you think? Suddenly, Nathan grabbed my hand. He pulled hard. Our positions instantly swapped. He became the one taking the initiative, but I couldn't think about that right now. Because the study door opened, I could still hear Mason saying goodbye to Grandpa Thompson at the door. After Grandpa Thompson left, once the door was closed, Nathan and I awkwardly hid behind the door. Our positions looked somewhat intimate. Right now, all I could think of were two words. It's over. Nathan looked at me, terrified. He leaned close to my ear, smiling. He asked, "Are you scared? Weren't you quite bold just now?" I shot him an angry glance. My heart was racing. Do I even need to say it? If Mason saw us, let alone getting close to Nathan, I wouldn't even be able to keep Mason, this big catch. Mason is about to come out of the study. The footsteps are getting closer. My heart is about to jump out. I quickly looked at Nathan. There was a hint of pleading in my eyes. If he would just let me go now, maybe I could find a reason to get through this. But his tall body pressed against me like a wall. I couldn't move at all. At this critical moment, Grandpa Thompson's voice came from the study. No need to close the door. Mason turned around and walked in another direction. I took a deep breath. The tense nerves finally relaxed. My legs went weak. I almost fell. I quickly broke free from Nathan's side and rushed down the stairs. Mason didn't notice my abnormality. He just watched me go downstairs, then asked, "Sophia, where did you go just now?" His expression was grim. His brows were tightly furrowed. There was obvious anger in his eyes. Clearly, he was scolded by Grandpa Thompson in the study. He poured all his pent-up rage and dissatisfaction onto me. His words were filled with complaints, but I couldn't take in a single word. My mind kept replaying the scene where I confronted Nathan behind the door. That dangerous aura about him. It was captivating. I could feel it. He was just like me. Both of us enjoyed adventure and thrills. We relished the excitement of living on the edge. This feeling thrilled me. It also strengthened my determination to conquer him. Just as I was lost in thought, Mason suddenly interrupted me. "Baby, Grandpa Thompson is leaving tomorrow. Stay with me a few more days." "Okay." I felt a surge of joy inside. This opportunity was just too good. Once Grandpa Thompson leaves, I can seize the time and push my plan forward. I nodded immediately and said, "Of course, that sounds great. I was just thinking about spending more time with you in a little while." Nathan also came down from upstairs. He walked straight past me. He didn't even glance at me. There was no expression on his face, as if what happened behind the door just now never occurred. But I knew in my heart, we already had a shared secret between us, although we haven't spoken it out loud. But this layer of paper is already too thin to withstand. It could be pierced at any moment. Because of this secret, my relationship with him has unknowingly become closer. I smiled faintly, with a confident expression on my face. During dinner, the atmosphere at the table was a bit strange. Grandpa Thompson sat in the middle. Mason and Nathan sat on either side. I sat next to Mason. He occasionally chatted with Nathan. Although his tone was calm, it revealed the elder's concern for the younger. As for Mason, he always remains indifferent. He doesn't even want to spare a glance. Mason clearly sensed Grandpa Thompson's different attitude towards them. His expression became increasingly unpleasant. After he finished eating, I also can't sit for too long, so I also got up and left this meal. Some people ate happily, while others were left feeling discontented. That night, Grandpa Thompson suddenly had something to do and left in a hurry. I had originally thought, with Grandpa Thompson away these days, it would be a good chance to get closer to Nathan, to strengthen our relationship. But unexpectedly, Grandpa Thompson took Nathan along as well. I stood there, feeling a chill in my heart, to gather some information. I had no choice but to find Mason. I pretended to chat casually and asked him, "Mason, why did Grandpa Thompson take Uncle Nathan along this time? How come he brought Uncle Nathan with him?" Mason is feeling down because of Grandpa Thompson's neglect. He heard my question. He answered a bit impatiently. Grandpa Thompson took him to explore overseas markets. I was cursing my luck inside. This is the end. My plans have all been disrupted. In the evening, Mason said he wanted to share a room with me. I quickly found an excuse. "Mason, I've not been feeling well these past few days. How about we sleep separately instead?" Mason is still angry about what happened during the day. He probably doesn't feel like getting close to me either. When he heard me say that, although he looked a bit unhappy, he didn't insist anymore. I stayed with the Thompson family for a whole week. Days passed one by one. I was getting more and more anxious. I have to leave. If I stay any longer, it might raise suspicion among the elders of the Thompson family. They might think I don't understand the rules, and that I'm not mature enough. As a woman who wants to marry into a wealthy family, I understand this very well. It's not enough for a man to simply like you. The most important thing is to win the approval and affection of his family. The day before I left, Nathan came back. I had just come downstairs in the morning and found him sitting on the sofa in the living room. He glanced up at me. His gaze was very calm. Then he returned to his usual indifferent demeanor. I felt a bit nervous inside, but more than that, I was excited. No matter what, tomorrow I will be leaving, so today, I must make some progress with Nathan, even if it's just getting his contact information. I stared at Nathan's back, quickly calculating in my mind, how can I get him to notice me? Without seeming too deliberate, by evening, I quietly slipped into his room. The room was empty. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened. Nathan walked out, a bath towel casually draped around his waist. His upper body is exposed. He has a sturdy build. He saw me, not surprised at all, only raised an eyebrow. A playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was deep and pleasant. I took a deep breath. Trying hard to calm myself down, I countered him. "What do you think? I thought you already understood what I meant." Nathan walked to the side of the bed, slowly sat down. He smiled gently. "What are your thoughts?" I moved closer to him, gently gliding my fingers over his sturdy body. "Some things, once said, lose their meaning," I whispered. "Why not? I'll show you through my actions." "Okay." Nathan still had no reaction. I gritted my teeth. He walked over and turned off the light. Then, summoning courage, she sat down on his lap in the darkness. We could only feel each other's breath and body heat. Suddenly, Mason slammed the door open. He shouted angrily, "Nathan, you!" He glanced inside the room. He was momentarily stunned. I pressed my head tightly against Nathan's shoulder. "This is bad. Everything is over." Nathan steadied my waist with his hand. He shot Mason a cold glance. He said coldly, "You don't knock before entering my room. Get out." I felt Mason's gaze fixed on me. I felt his gaze as if it could penetrate my back. He must be doubting me. I started to break out in a cold sweat on my back. I began to doubt. Did Mason recognize my silhouette? After a while, Mason spoke up. There's a hint of sarcasm in his tone. "Nathan, everyone outside says you don't like women. I didn't expect you to bring a woman home, too." He paused for a moment. Then he continued speaking. "Hurry up. I have something to ask you." Mason smirked. Then he turned and walked away, and he closed the door behind him. I sighed in relief. I felt a bit more relaxed, but my body was still tense. I didn't dare to move. Nathan's voice echoed in my ear. It was deep with a hint of teasing. "What is this where it ends?" It was then that I snapped back to reality, but he still had no intention of getting off me. Instead, he pressed even closer. His voice was soft and seductive. "Uncle Nathan, I'm leaving tomorrow. Do you really not want to have anything happen between us?" Nathan suddenly pushed me away. There was sarcasm in his eyes. "I'm not low enough to become a third party." I remained silent. I picked up his phone from the bedside table. Nathan just watched. He didn't stop me. I took his phone. I dialed my own number. I winked at him. I gave a meaningful smile. "Remember to call me." After saying that, I turned to leave. Just as I opened the door a crack, I saw Mason standing outside the door. His back was turned to the door. I jumped in fright. I quickly closed the door. Nathan let out a cold laugh. "Scared, huh? Weren't you quite bold just now?" After saying that, he walked over and pulled the door open. He asked calmly, "What's the matter?" I listened carefully to the sounds outside the door. The footsteps gradually walked away. I finally relaxed. I quickly went back to my room and changed my clothes. Not long after, Mason pushed the door and walked in. He looked at me. His expression was complicated. It seemed like he had something to say but didn't. Just now, I saw a woman in Nathan's room. I was startled. Could it be that Mason has already found me out? But right after that, he said again, "Nathan actually brought a woman home. This means that this woman must be very important to him. I must find out who she is." I suddenly felt both amused and helpless. It turns out he didn't recognize me at all. The next day, I moved out of the Thompson family. After returning home, I looked at Nathan's number on my phone screen. I was pondering the gains and losses of these past few days. Although I experienced quite a few setbacks, I finally made some progress. At least I got his contact information. I remembered what Nathan had said. It seems that, if I don't handle Mason's situation well, it will be difficult to truly get close to Nathan, as someone with professional principles. I will never let myself be bound by morality, so the best way is to let Mason make a mistake first. Then I will propose a breakup. This way, I can leave him openly as a victim. Thinking of this, I quickly came up with an idea. Having been with Mason for so long, I know very well what kind of girls he likes. He prefers those gentle, obedient, seemingly weak and helpless girls in front of him, the type that can spark his protective instincts. People like Mason are actually not uncommon. As far as I know, he had many admirers in college. Although I eventually became his girlfriend, there were also many competitors with good conditions and high skills at that time. Now, to rekindle Mason's interest again, besides women, it's his career. What he needs most right now, is a woman who can help him. I already have a perfect plan in mind. I dug out that long unused alumni group. My fingers are sliding on the phone screen, among the many unfamiliar names. I saw Emily. After she accepted my friend request, she sent a question mark over. I didn't reply to her message right away. Instead, I directly called her. The call connected quickly. Emily's voice was filled with confusion and caution. "What do you want from me? If you're here to show off, then forget it." I chuckled. I said, "I can give Mason to you." Emily on the other end sounded very surprised. "What did you say?" I said. "I can give Mason to you." I repeated it. My tone was very firm. "As long as you're willing." "Why?" Emily's voice was filled with confusion. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I've fallen for someone else." If others hear me say this, they might feel uncomfortable, but Emily is Mason's #1 fan. She will definitely agree. Sure enough, after a while, she asked, Really?" I answered without hesitation. "Okay, I promise you." I shared my long thought-out plan with Emily in detail. I explained what Mason currently likes and what he needs at work, and his personality flaws. I taught Emily how to use this information to slowly approach Mason and win back his heart. After a few days, I invited Mason out for dinner and introduced Emily to him. I casually mentioned Emily's family business. Mason's eyes immediately sparkled with interest. At the same time, I didn't forget about Nathan. Since we hurriedly parted ways that day at the Thompson family, he hasn't contacted me since. I remained calm. I took the initiative to add him on WeChat. After he accepted my friend request, I didn't message him right away. Instead, I deliberately chose a photo. I pretended to accidentally send it to him. In the photo, I'm wearing a tight short skirt, showing off a pair of long, fair legs. This is the bait I specially prepared. I dare say, any ordinary man seeing this photo would have some reaction. But Nathan had no reaction at all. However, I don't really care. If I gave up so easily, then I wouldn't deserve to be called a gold digger. I searched for all of Nathan's information online. I found out he would be attending an Entrepreneur Influence Summit tomorrow. It just so happens they were also looking for volunteers, so I signed up to be a server. Sure enough, the next day I saw Nathan on site. He seemed a bit surprised to see me. I gave a slight smile, holding a dessert as I walked up to him. My hand shook, his hand trembled. The cake fell at his feet. Nathan frowned. Not a sound. I bent down. I picked up the dessert, taking this opportunity. I slipped my hand into his suit pants, gently sliding on his calf. Nathan's movements paused for a moment. His body leaned slightly forward. I noticed his breathing becoming heavy and slow. I slowly stood up, looking directly into his eyes. Let the ambiguous atmosphere linger in the air. He gazed deeply at me. His expression was complex and difficult to understand. I turned and walked away, not hesitating at all. I need to keep my distance. Sometimes close, sometimes far. This way, he will become more interested in me, wanting to get closer. Like a cat catching a mouse, it has to be slow, so that I can enjoy the process. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Emily. She said she was getting along well with Mason. "We've already had several meals together." I smiled. Things are going according to my plan. I know Mason very well. What he likes, what he dislikes. I'm completely aware of it all. He's like a machine I've disassembled and studied. I know how to handle every part. I took out the powder I had prepared earlier, packaged it in a pretty little box, sent it to Emily. "This is a love-enhancing drug. It can help them get closer faster. Be careful when using it. Don't let him notice." I sent Emily a voice message. Unlike Nathan, dealing with Mason needs to be resolved quickly. He's like a piece of fragile glass. A slight touch could break him. What I need to do is find his weakest spot and then strike gently. Days later, Emily messaged me again. It was a brief message. Done. I stared at the screen. I couldn't help but laugh. I understand. Mason is completely in trouble. The next day, Mason asked me out. Let's break up. He spoke up. His tone was icy. I had already anticipated he would say that, because when I chose to be with Mason, I knew his personality was cold and decisive. I pretended to be surprised. I widened my eyes and asked, "Why, Mason? Haven't we always been good together?" I've fallen for someone else," he asked impatiently. "Is it Emily?" He seemed a bit surprised. I smiled helplessly. I had already noticed. You two have been spending a lot of time together lately. I started to cry. Tears kept streaming down. Mason, are you really going to leave? I held onto his arm tightly. The voice trembled. I can't live without you. He forcefully shook off my hand. He said coldly, "Stop bothering me. I don't like people who are useless to me." I cried even harder. My whole body was shaking. Mason left without looking back. After he left, I smiled faintly. There was not a trace of sadness on my face. All I felt inside was relief and the excitement that was about to come. I took my phone out of my bag. I dialed a number. "Hello, is this the office of the president of Thompson Group? I would like to apply for the secretary position." After a few days, I received news about the interview. When I walked into the conference room, I found Nathan among the interviewers. He was a bit surprised to see me, but he quickly calmed down. The interview went very smoothly, although Nathan didn't say anything the whole time, but I remained calm and confident. During my university years, my grades in every course ranked in the top 3 of the department because I wanted to be the best, so my resume had to be outstanding. During the break, I stood up. I followed Nathan to the restroom. He seemed to have known I would follow him, standing in front of the sink, quietly waiting for me. "I broke up with Mason," I whispered. My tone carried a hint of suggestion. He chuckled coldly and retorted, "What does that have to do with me?" I took a step forward. Getting closer to him, I gently blew in his ear. The voice was soft and seductive. "This means you can do anything to me." He suddenly turned around and squeezed my cheek hard. The grip was strong enough to leave me gasping for breath. He looked at me coldly, with a hint of sarcasm at the corner of his mouth. "You approached me. It was all for money, right?" I blinked, respond innocently. "There are plenty of rich people. Why would I specifically want your money?" I paused for a moment. "Say it. Isn't it because you're quite to my taste?" He was taken aback for a moment. The strength in his hand weakened a bit. I seized the opportunity. I broke free from his hand and turned to leave. I understood. I had already planted a seed in his heart. In the following days, I didn't look for him again, because while reviewing his information, I unexpectedly discovered that we graduated from the same university. Soon, our school will be celebrating its centennial alumni reunion. This is a rare good opportunity. I can use this chance to approach him again. On the day of the alumni reunion, I specifically wore a pure white dress. Nathan was standing next to the school leaders. Chat with them. He was wearing a dark suit, standing very straight. He stood out in the crowd. Our eyes met for a moment. He paused for a few seconds. Then he averted his gaze as if nothing happened. I felt secretly pleased. It seems I chose the right outfit back in college. He liked this style quite a bit. On the day of the alumni reunion, a lot of people who used to pursue me came to chat. They were subtly probing, trying to see if they could rekindle something with me. I didn't refuse either. They all added me on WeChat. I added them all to my friend list. Honestly, I had no intention of getting involved with them. I just wanted to see Nathan's reaction. Maybe I was too straightforward when adding them on WeChat. Not long after, I was surrounded by a group of people, 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. I had almost become the focus of the entire venue. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I still haven't seen Nathan show up. He must have left at some point without anyone noticing. The alumni reunion ceremony hasn't started yet. I estimate he will come back later. I'm just wandering around the campus, thinking about the past, waiting for Nathan to arrive. I accidentally walked in front of a display board. It showcased the school's outstanding achievements and donation records over the years. One particular message caught my eye. It was from my freshman year. My mother suddenly fell seriously ill. My younger brother was still small. Not only had we exhausted all our savings, but we also owed a lot of debt. I almost couldn't continue my studies. When my counselor found out, they immediately organized a fundraising for me. To my surprise, in just a few days, they raised 100,000 yuan. This helped me solve a major problem. Since then, I've decided I want to marry into a wealthy family. I can never let myself fall into such an embarrassing situation again. I always thought donations were anonymous. I never paid attention to the donation list. But at this moment, my gaze stopped at the line that said on her, Nathan. He donated 100,000 yuan all by himself. I looked at that small print and felt quite surprised. Could it be that Nathan knew me back in college? I quickly walked towards the rooftop. That was a place we often went to during our student days. Sure enough, Nathan was standing there smoking in the smoke. His profile looked somewhat blurred. He saw me and let out a cold laugh. His tone was full of sarcasm. Don't you like money? You've added so many men on WeChat. Isn't that enough? I ignored his mocking remarks. I stared directly at him. My voice trembled slightly. Back then, the one who donated to me. Was it you? Nathan's hand holding the cigarette paused slightly. I noticed this small gesture. My previous suspicion has now been confirmed. Suddenly, a bold thought flashed through my mind like lightning. I stepped closer, almost close enough to touch him. His voice was deep and hoarse. Nathan, do you like me? He didn't say anything. He just looked at me quietly. He has feelings for me. It started back in college, donating money to get close and acting aloof while constantly testing. These behaviors, were they all because he likes me? This thought made me feel both absurd and a bit excited. I couldn't help wanting to get closer to him. I wanted to ask him for clarification. I reached out to grab his collar, but he pushed me away in an instant. He gripped my chin tightly. His strength was terrifying. Don't overthink it. I've seen too many women like you. I've seen too many. I had to lift my head, to look directly into his emotionless eyes. Nathan. I struggled to squeeze out a few words. My voice was hoarse. You. Before I could finish speaking, he interrupted me rudely. Don't give me that, he said. It's useless to me. Then he let go of my hand, but my hand was already on his chest. Then why is your heart beating so fast? I asked him, my fingers still resting on his chest. Even though he spoke coldly, trying to act as if nothing was wrong, but this uncontrollable reaction already said it all. Nathan's body stiffened. He didn't respond immediately. A surge of indescribable excitement rose in my heart, like a fox grasping the tail of its prey, pressing closer. So, back when I was at your house, and treated you like that, you didn't refuse. It's because you have feelings for me already. I deliberately paused and elongated the ending sound. Watching the cold mask on his face gradually crack, I continued to provoke him with words. You, as Uncle Nathan, actually having thoughts about your nephew's girlfriend. Nathan, is this how you should act? Nathan gritted his teeth. He squeezed out a sentence through clenched teeth. Stop talking. I'm just not listening. On the contrary, it makes me more excited. Have you been secretly watching me and Mason, watching us in a relationship? How do you feel about it inside? After quite a while, Nathan seemed to finally give up struggling. He slowly exhaled a breath. That breath carried a trace of barely noticeable fatigue and helplessness. That's right. I did like you back then, but he hadn't finished his sentence. I'll just speak up. I agree. Nathan was taken aback for a moment. It seemed he didn't expect me to be so straightforward. His eyes were filled with surprise and confusion. I looked him straight in the eye. Speak slowly. As long as you have money, I will always be there for you. Nathan was silent for a while, then suddenly spoke in a low voice. His voice was a bit hoarse. The Thompson family probably won't go bankrupt. I smiled. His answer was about what I expected. I can only say, I guess I'm a lucky girl. I originally did it for the money, but unexpectedly found true love. God is truly a master storyteller.